I did not get it.
All right, everyone, we're ready to start if everybody out there is ready to start. I'm going to call to order the regular meeting of the Common Council of the City of Platteville for Tuesday, February 28th, 2017, and we'll start with roll call.
Don Francis.
Here.
Tom Knoll.
Here.
Ken Killian.
Here.
Eileen Nichols.
Here.
Amy Seaboth Wilson.
Here.
Catherine Westaby. Here. And Barbara Doss is excused.
All right, we have a fun thing to start our evening, a special presentation to acknowledge Dennis Moen's 39 years of service to the City of Platteville.
Howard and I are going to tag team this. Normally we would have the recipient here tonight, but for those of you that know Dennis and what he shared with me is, you know what, Karen, there's a reason I work in the wastewater treatment plant, and that's because I'm an introvert. So we decided to let him off the hook tonight, and we're going to do this in his honor, and playing the role of Dennis will be Howard. And so we wanted to share this proclamation for Dennis's 39 years of service with the city. Whereas Dennis has faithfully served the City of Platteville since 1978, and whereas Dennis has shown his commitment to the City of Platteville by continuing to train and grow in his positions from wastewater treatment plant operator to foreman, receiving many certifications along the way, and whereas Dennis has displayed an exemplary work ethic in that time as wastewater treatment plant foreman, the wastewater treatment plant areas of compliance maintenance annual report has always had perfect grades. Whereas Dennis has hosted many tours of the plant to help educate new operators, Platteville grade school children, and UWP students on wastewater treatment plant operations. Whereas Dennis has embodied the spirit of public service in faithfully, diligently, and honestly executing his duties. He has sat on state committees to evaluate and rewrite operator exams and training requirements. And whereas Dennis's professional talents and involvement has contributed to making the Platteville community a better place to live, work, and play. Now, therefore, I, Karen M. Kurt, City Manager of the City of Platteville, on behalf of the Common Council and city employees, both past and present, do hereby wish to express our sincere appreciation to Dennis Moen for his dedication and service to the City of Platteville. And I would just say quickly that I think the wastewater treatment plant is one of those areas of the city that we just all take for granted, that it's going to function and function well, and it is a lot trickier than it looks. And we are so fortunate to have people as Dennis and Jeff Frederick, who will be taking his place to shepherd that operation for us. And with that, I will let Dennis's stand-in say a couple of words.
Thank you. On behalf of Dennis, I would like to thank the City of Platteville for the opportunity that it has provided him over the past 39 years. He's saying that he takes great pride in knowing that the wastewater treatment plant has exceeded all expectations on its yearly inspections and standards set by the state of Wisconsin, protecting public health and water quality in the community and the watershed. And he is also extremely confident in the expertise of his coworkers' ability to maintain the same high standards the City of Platteville has come to expect in the everyday operations of our very unique facility. Thank you.
All right. And I will say, yes, having looked over a number of those reports over a number of years, they are always just excellent reports. So they are to be commended. All right, just for everybody's information, I think most of you know in the audience, but if you do want to speak for citizens' comments, observations, or petitions, or on one of our other items under action, fill one of these out and complete it and give it to our city clerk, and then she will provide it to me. All right, next item is consideration of the consent calendar. Following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to the routine nature of previous discussion. Please indicate to the council president if you would prefer separate discussion and action. A is council minutes from our February 14th meeting. B is payment of bills. C is appointments to boards and commissions. This evening, I have an appointment for the Board of Review, Robert Stoffiger. We do have openings on the Historic Preservation Commission, an alternate position, and April 1st, there will be 2 positions open on the Board of Appeals, ET zoning. So if you're interested in serving on a committee, please fill out a form. You can do that online. It's available on platteville.org, and let us know that the committee you'd be interested in. Licenses in our packet, 1-year and 2-year operator licenses to sell or serve alcohol. Also in our packet, temporary Class B retailer's license for St. Augustine University Parish for a fish fry on 3/3/17 and 3/24/17. And finally, permits for a street closing on Keyway Parkway from Progressive Parkway to Cornerstone Circle and Cornerstone Circle on April 29th from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. for the 4th Annual Wisconsin Energy Efficient Vehicle Association Competition. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, and we'll vote.
Francis?
Yes.
Nall?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson?
Yes.
Westoby?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Citizens' comments, observation, and petitions, I don't believe I have any. The ones that I have here, excuse me, are for items that we are going to be talking about later. In our packet are reports, Housing Authority Board, Killian,
No addition.
Library Board, Westoby,
No addition.
Commission on Aging, Westoby,
No addition.
Museum Board, Seaboth Wilson,
No addition.
and Historic Preservation Commission, Killian.
No addition.
All right, first action item is plan unit development, the specific implementation plan for the former Pioneer Ford site. We have some information on our desk. I think that most of you have it, so. All right.
So the next 2 items, which would be the specific implementation plan and the developers agreement, we're going to kick off with a couple of presentations. I'll share a little bit of background information, and then I'll ask Sig from General Capital to come up and give another brief overview on the project. So just to start things off with,
I'm sorry, Karen, for those of you who are sitting in our audience, if you look in the back, the presentation will be projected back there.
just as a refresher, with respect to the site that we're talking about, which is on the corner of Pine Streets and Water, and then also the property on the east and west side of Oak Street. Really, this project starts long before I get here with the downtown master plan. And just remember, the downtown master plan was a lot of work done by a lot of people to sort of set the vision for the downtown area. In the plan, it describes downtown Platteville as a vibrant place and the cultural heart and identity of the community. A diverse business mix is thriving and profiting. Arrival to the downtown district is distinctive and appealing, and parking is easy to find. Visitors discover reasons to linger and explore, and more people choose to live downtown. In that document, there were 13 redevelopment sites identified, and the former Pioneer Ford site was one of those 13. So again, there was a lot of history with respect to this site, and I've highlighted some of the key dates here, and thank you to Joe Carroll, who really did the bulk of this work. So it was in January of 2011 that the downtown master plan was adopted. Later that year, in September, the property was listed for sale by the owner, and there were no takers. In April of 2015, the city signed an offer to purchase the property, and then in the summer of 2015, obtained some grants to help with the acquisition costs, environmental assessment, and demolition. At the end of December of 2015, the city closed on the property. At the same time, we held a community visioning session to discuss the future of the site. On the next page, next slide, it tells a little bit about the types of questions that we asked in that community visioning session. What types of features would help establish this as a gateway to downtown? What types of uses should be considered for the site? What don't we want to see on this site when the project is done? I hope we can say blank about the site. And a similar online survey was conducted. The outcome of that visioning session then became the guiding principles for the RFP and talked about things such as that the site should serve as a gateway, be smart with parking, include a multi-story, multi-use building, complement Platteville's historic downtown, connect to the outdoors and street, and grow the tax base. Moving on with respect to the history, then, after the visioning session, an RFP was issued with responses due in April of 2016. The council appointed a task force to evaluate those RFP responses. And in June of 2016, the task force recommended the proposal submitted by General Capital. And a month later, the city council selected General Capital as a developer for the site. And then we began the PUD process, which brings us to where we are today. Just a little bit on the financing of that site acquisition and remediation. The city's purchase price for the property was $982,426. The expenses, which are estimated at this point, because we don't know what the exact expenses will be for the environmental review and site demolition, is estimated $180,000 for total expenses of $1.162 million. We had offsetting revenue in the form of a community development block grant of $500,000 and then a site assessment grant for $150,000 for a net city cost of $512,426. Again, that's estimated. It is important that the city secure a developer or will be critical for us to receive full reimbursement from that CDBG grant. For the project financing for the proposed project before you, the developer loans, grants, and equity would total just over $2.5 million. Tax credits would be over $9 million of the deal, and the city would put in $1.3 million in TIF investment for a total investment of $12,882,000. The city would also deed the property to the developer for $1. And again, the net total cost for that property from the city's perspective was just over $500,000. The developer will pay to the city in the form of guaranteed tax payments. The principal payment on the TIF assistance loan that the $1.3 million referenced earlier, the interest payments associated with that TIF assistance, any borrowing costs associated with the TIF assistance, plus $21,469, which represents the taxes that have been generated on the property prior to the city's purchase. As long as the city owns the property, the site is generating no tax revenue. I wanted to talk a little bit about the impact to the tax increment district that this property resides in, TID 7, which is the downtown area. So with the guaranteed tax payments covering all the loans, costs associated with the TIF assistance, principal, interest, borrowing costs, the TIF assistance would not have a negative impact on the TID district. Basically, we're kind of acting as a pass-through entity. In addition, the guaranteed tax payment would cover the taxes previously generated on the site prior to the city's acquisition. And the city would be eligible to receive the full reimbursement for the CDBG grant and site assessment grants. There are some costs or risks associated with inaction. One would be that the property remains off the tax rolls because it's owned by the city. And secondly, that we would have to request an extension to the CDBG grant and the site assessment grants and go out on the market to seek a new developer. I also want to comment briefly on how this project relates to the general fund, because I heard some comments made at the meeting I wasn't at the last meeting that I didn't think were quite on the mark. So approving or not approving this project will not have any impact on the projected shortfall in the city's general fund budget. These are two separate funds with separate budgets. So not approving this project will not result in any additional operating funds for the museum, senior center, or any other city operating expenses. And I think it's really important that we're clear about that, because I know that message got a little bit mixed with the library block. And then lastly, just with respect to timeline, as I think was noted at the last meeting, this project is contingent on the developer securing tax credits from WIDA, and they're intending to do that this week yet, I believe. If the credits were awarded, it would be done in April. And if they are awarded the credits, then construction would start in the fall of this year with anticipated completion by the end of 2018. And with that, I will turn it over to Sig. I just wanted to make perhaps one last comment before I sit down, and that is one of the new practices that we've brought to the city of Platteville is that when there is city assistance involved, that we have an independent financial advisor do a pro forma assessment analysis to determine that assistance is warranted. That it meets the but-for test with respect to the tax increment district, and also that the city's contribution is not unduly enriching the developer. And you had the analysis forwarded to you earlier this week. I would also note that Frank from Ellers, who did the assessment, is with us tonight and is available to answer any questions you might have with respect to that aspect of the project.
Slides again. Hello, everyone, again. It's good to be back here.
You would just give your name again, just for our record.
Sure. It's Sig Strautmanis, and I'm with General Capital, and we're the developers on the project, and also the long-term owners, I might add. So it's been a long path at this point. I think that a lot has transpired since we first took a look at this property. And what I'm going to show you tonight is the specific implementation plan, which is the second step of a planned unit development zoning. What I want to emphasize, and sometimes people get nervous about developers making changes along the way, things happening to a project, quality levels changing, things like that. There's nervousness when it comes to approving a project. What is really powerful about a specific implementation plan and the planned unit development process is that basically this is a contract between us and the city. So what you see is what you get. If I want to make any changes to this, I or somebody in our group, be it a construction person, whatever, based on site conditions, we can have every excuse in the world. We can't do anything about it. Because what we've done now is we've come before you with a contractual agreement, basically, for what you see is what you get. So the general development plan that we talked about at the Plan Commission, and then you also approved at the general plan level, gave us basically the construct, and now the SIP gives us the specifics. So this document is much longer. It's 20-some pages, and I won't go through the whole thing again. What I want to do is just hit the highlights to maybe, I don't think anyone needs to refresh their memory, but maybe just talk through a couple of the things that we heard and some changes that were made as we went through this process. So what we're showing you tonight and what we're asking for approval in its final form is the specific implementation plan. So I'm going to skip over a handful of these slides to first of all the site plan, and that went a little too quickly. There, the site plan. What you'll notice is that this site plan does reflect the general development plan. So we actually didn't make changes, fundamental changes to the site plan that was approved as a general development plan. So what we have here, I'm going to try to use a laser pointer, is we have the existing parking lot on Oak Street here. We have the Pioneer 4 building. These are kind of the cornerstones, if you want to call it that. We have the rest of the parcel that we are demolishing, the former Kohl's building, that small commercial building, and you will also notice that the hotel building is also gone to make room for the parking and traffic pattern that was discussed at the Plan Commission, approved, et cetera. So what this does is it allows for one-way traffic circulation into the site. So that alleviates concern about two-way traffic at this entrance. That was in response to Plan Commission and the council's concerns. And it also allows two-way traffic in and out of Oak Street, which would be our primary vehicular kind of entrance and exit. And we did that very deliberately because we felt that traffic, this is a one-way street, remember Oak Street's one-way, traffic will basically come in off of the grid, off of the street network, and either take a right here and enter our this, you can barely see this light, but enter this area, this parking lot, or else come through here to the other parking lot, or else go up to Main, come back down Oak to here. So people who live here will be familiar with the traffic patterns and how it flows so that there won't be traffic conflicts, or I should say the traffic conflicts that people were concerned about should be alleviated. The other thing that we did since we were in front of you with the general development plan is we took a look at how traffic flows down Oak Street. We added some on-street parking spaces, some diagonal parking here for guests and visitors, et cetera, to the commercial space on Oak Street. We closed off that secondary access point that went over to Oak Street, so we gained parking spaces. In other words, we maximized what we possibly could on the site. Other pieces of the site plan have really remained the same. We have the two-story Pioneer Ford building. The lower level will be commercial. That will kind of reflect, the primary street. And then our main pedestrian/residential entrance will be where this arrow is. And we're going to reconfigure the Pioneer Ford building with a lot of storefront glass and a glass garage door, some very cool elements so that this kind of the historic nature of this really starts to, we kind of go to the guts of it. It's going to be a very neat kind of an industrial vibe to this building. And that will set the tone for the whole project as you come into the main entrance through the Pioneer Ford building. And the addition kind of is an L-shaped, frames a courtyard on the rest of the site. One of the important things that we tried to do from the start with this project is reflect and respect the street grid and kind of the nature and character of the street so that it was urban, like your plan suggests that this site should be, a mixed-use urban scale development. So that's the site plan. I guess the final thing is we did add some additional parking up here. I think there's about 4 or 5 more spaces that were added since the GDP, but otherwise, kind of the spirit of the plan hasn't changed from the general development plan that was approved last time. I'm also going to skip forward to another small item that came up, and that is the nature of the parking lot frontage. And somewhere here I have a plan of it. This seems like an insignificant little elevation, but the council and plan commission were a little concerned about what that parking lot was like, if this is a redevelopment project, are you actually going to address that surface parking lot, what's going to be done there. So last time we were here, we committed to doing some form of screening and or covered parking, and that's what this ended up being. There's some comment that it's still too transparent, so what we ended up doing now is we added, it's difficult to see here, but you can see in your packets that we added screening, basically a mesh-style screening that can grow green, which I think could be kind of nice. So it'll end up being kind of a vine-covered element that will screen that parking, and so there's kind of a trellis effect on this. And this does go downhill a little bit, so it'll kind of climb downhill at an angle. But that was a little change from last time too, so we added a little additional screening that was in response to something that we heard at the last meeting. The other thing, and I'm going to skip through to the 3D renderings, which I think depict the character of this building. There's been kind of ongoing discussion about that ground level elevation, what you see at the street corner, and we've been working and continuing to fine tune that. We added the monumental stair on the east side of the building that kind of absorbs some of the grade, so that's not just this big, half-story exposed lower level. Now there's a quit using those words. There is a monumental stair up the side of the building now. And then also we did an embed in the base of the building to have some trellis work right along the base at the hard corner, so that will also let us do more vines and growth on the corner. So like we're doing with the parking screen, you'll also get some trellis work and some vines growing up on the corner. And then the other thing that we heard comments on is what are these materials actually going to be? We want a sample, so I brought that with me. And just, you know, equally important to when I say that there's a contract going on here, these are samples that are real materials. There's a large scale masonry unit that's basically, it's a brick unit that goes on the base of the building where you're going to see that in the elevations. It's, you know, clearly depicted now. And then there's 3 colors of cementitious siding, and the brand will be one of probably 3 different brands, but Nichiha is one brand you've probably heard of. Hardy is another brand. They all have custom extrusions and corner elements and things so that when it goes on, it's nice and clean. The fasteners can be exposed or not. We can kind of choose different little details like that. But basically, there's no vinyl on this building, so no one needs to be concerned about, oh, this is going to look like a vinyl, you know, clad building. These are the materials that we're committing to. The other thing that there is some concern about is vision glass. Communities don't want to see any kind of reflective coating on glass. This is a real glass sample that we'll use as replacement glass in the Pioneer Ford building, and any kind of storefront that you'd see on the project will be, you know, real deal storefront glass. And then some samples of the extrusions. This will be actually the fiberglass unit that's on the building itself. No vinyl windows. We're using fiberglass units. It's just a higher quality, higher caliber material. So these are actually, when you see the color renderings, you see that the yellow is kind of, before there's some comment about the yellow being very bright, and even some commentary about switching up some of the interior courtyard elevations. So we paled that back to more of an earth tone. So I think it's a nice kind of a medium blend, and the 3 colors now are that kind of that, call it a dove gray, that pale yellow, and then the white. And so the materials that you see on the sample board are what are in that elevation. And you'll also see that from the start, some of the things that we did were, you know, articulating the building, trying to break down the massing by making it really 2 different forms that are brought together with that kind of atrium element between them. You can see that we increased the amount of glass since the very first time you saw this on the corner. We modified the ground floor to respect some of the comments about lower level residential to kind of make that a little more private for the residents. So all these comments that you had, I believe, you know, to the best of our ability, we've built into this final set, and our architects are happy with it. I'm happy with it, and I think it reflects, you know, the comments to date. And I guess this is the last slide on the 3D. So that's all I have for my presentation. I'm more than happy to answer questions and get into any part of the details. And you know, this will be part of the ordinance. You know, this is our contract to live up to what we're committing to tonight.
Question for everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm curious as to how the hardy plank is attached. You
Sure.
run the, something through the hardy plank, or
Yes.
how's it done?
So it depends on the system. Hardy plank is direct applied onto the vapor barrier, so it's more like siding, but it's just larger paneled siding. And the Nichiha, which I'm on the front of the building, I'm 90% sure we're going to use, but this is Nichiha that I'm showing you here. And what happens is that has actually a fastener system, so it stands off the building by a small amount. I'd say ½ an inch, ½ inch, ½ inch. And it's more of a rain screen system, so it's slightly different than the hardy plank, but the appearance would be similar. Depends on the unit that you use.
So what's the fastening? Is it screwed?
Yeah, it'd be galvanized, yeah.
And does
It's
it come
screwed
through
to a
the hardy
substrate.
plank? Do they go through the hardy plank?
Yes. And the Nichiha has a hanging system where you don't necessarily screw through that, but it's clipped in larger panels.
Okay, then it's attached to what thickness of material? What material?
It'd be
Plywood?
3/4 ply. You know,
Three-quarter
kind of exterior plywood that has either liquid applied membrane, that would be the vapor barrier on the outside, or else things that you'd typically see are the rolled out green guard or other form of the weatherproofing that you see on houses. Drawing a blank. Thank you, Tyvek. More like Tyvek. Be one or the other.
I bring this up in part because we have Jenner Towers, and Jenner Towers years ago, some people may remember, lost part of its finish, just fell off.
That there's different reasons why that could happen, and I'm not sure what happened there, but basically it depends on the fasteners you use. It depends on the material itself, and I would say that recently that the materials have really come a long way in terms of just the quality levels, types of fasteners. Like they've seen those failures. It's kind of like when you saw certain siding from Georgia Pacific and all of a sudden the houses were rotting behind them and they're falling off. Well, they've fixed those problems by basically having different types of ventilation or whatever it is. So the siding that we're using, we've used this now, Nichihau we've used on probably 5 buildings now. And it looks great. And it's a very clean factory finish. It's also very important. Doesn't get painted in the field. It ends up coming pre-finished. Another thing that you'll see is sometimes when things are field applied, depending on the conditions, they'll start to peel, they'll start to degrade. You'll see other failures like that. But when it's factory finish, you just get that much more of a durable, long-term finish. So the idea is, we don't want maintenance, so we look for really maintenance-free or very light maintenance products.
Well, I appreciate the answers to my questions. It says that maintenance is required after about 15 years. Painting?
Yeah, so there will be a regular maintenance schedule for everything here, and we actually have money reserved for that. But that factory finish is probably a 15-year finish. That's probably about right. We've had some that have lasted longer, but we'd probably put it into a regular maintenance program.
And I asked about the air conditioning. It said air conditioning compressors to be on the roof. Will
Right.
they be shielded from vision?
They will be placed, they'll be placed, what we try to do is we create a walkway so that our techs aren't walking all over the roof. So they'll be placed down the middle of the building. It's also for safety so that they're not all over the place. But then we end up running chases down, like maybe 6 air conditioners go to one chase, and those line sets go down into the building. We have like a little, I guess you call it like a little attic or something, where it comes up and you build it up a little roof, and then all the line sets go down in the building. And so in buildings that we've done, you don't see that from any perspective. If you were in a high-rise looking down, you'd see it, but when you're even way down the road, just your perspective and the angle of how you see that, those units are never visible. So we've, in Milwaukee, in the 3rd Ward, where they have historic design guidelines, they wanted us to shoot perspectives and show them all the angles of how these wouldn't be visible, and they're not visible, because they're in the middle, they're all down the middle of the building, on the roof.
What about sound?
Oh, the air conditioners?
Yes.
Well, they will be just like your residential air conditioning units. Every unit gets an air conditioning unit, so this isn't like a central system that has a big chiller. We have a couple of those, but they're very expensive, and they're a whole different type of system where you have to have individual, heat pumps and things in units. These are basically like they're small residential furnaces, and so gas-fired furnaces and air conditioning units on the roof. And that air conditioning unit's gonna be just as quiet as anything that you'd have at your home. And actually, it's probably less quiet, because at your home, you'd have it on the ground, you'd hear it. The blower's on the roof, and I don't think you'd even perceive it. It's not like a big chiller that's got 4-foot fans and things. It's
So the
very,
sound is going up into the air,
yeah, yes.
not spreading to the neighborhood.
I've never had
Be
yeah.
Oddfellows that has the closest.
Yeah, I would say that, it would be imperceptible. I mean, these are just like your residential air conditioning. You're not going to hear them. And I'd say that that's in contrast to the old school way of doing air conditioning was through-wall air conditioning units, and the majority of affordable housing you'll see out there will have through-wall air conditioning units. We used to do that as well. We've moved away from that, partly because these systems are just better. You have ductwork, you're cooling the whole unit, you're not just having a bedroom cooled. And the sound, frankly, when you go by a building that has 50 air conditioning units running, it's very different than having a nice clean elevation with no air conditioners hanging out, and they're all on the roof. So I mean, it's a positive evolution.
The other question I have is staggered stud.
Yes,
You have a stud system for every room, and then you insulate in between to
Right.
deaden the sound.
right. So between units, what we do is a 2x6 top and bottom plate and staggered studs, 2x4 studs. So between the units, basically, there's no drywall that hits wood with sound transmission that go to the neighboring unit. So that's called staggered stud construction. Now, what we do is we weave insulation through that, and we're also careful to not have any back-to-back electrical boxes. That's the other way that sound transmits, is through the outlets, believe it or not. If you have another outlet directly behind that, you can hear your neighbor talking on the phone. We always stagger that so there's no direct transmission. So it's, ideally, would it be double stud with drywall? But, there's ways that condos are built, and things like that are very much more, they're twice as robust, but it's a whole different thing. I mean, in every building that we've done lately, we've been doing staggered stud, and it's been successful. In between floors, we do a similar thing where we actually hang clips, resilient channel clips. You'd have insulation and sound mat, lightweight gypcrete. You have kind of this a system that should attenuate that sound pretty decently. Yeah.
If I could interrupt for just a minute, Councilmember Killian, they can't hear you on the TV because you have to speak into your microphone. They're not hearing your questions.
Oh, okay. Okay, those are my questions. You didn't hear them. But they heard his answers.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the questions were in our packet, so again, the packet's available at the library or at City Hall, so if you wanted to see his questions and you heard the answers.
And online.
Any other questions for the developer from the council members? No? All right, seeing none right now, we may have something later, but, before we have, council discussion, we do have a number of people who have asked to speak. All except one for informational purposes only and one against. So, Gary, if I start with you, do you want to speak against and informational, or do you want to come up a second time?
I'll come up second, in general.
You want to speak in general first, all right.
First, I want to speak in, my name is Gary Prohaska. I live at 280 Division Street in Platteville, Wisconsin. First, I want to mention, there was no mention about this yet, but anyway, the Preservation Commission has received a letter, which I know the council is aware of, but the public is not. It came from the state and from the national people that review historic preservation designation. And of course, it takes a process to get the designation, but they gave the recommendation letter on the designation, and they did say that it was historic on 2 levels, both historic on the status of the area locally, prehistory, transportation, manufacturing, commercial, national, and state level. And then they also mentioned that they were impressed with the historic integrity that remains in the building to show it as an historic hotel, both inside and out. So it met the requirements at 2 levels. The Preservation Commission has also moved to have a hearing process, and I know the city has mentioned this, or hasn't mentioned this, but they received notification in writing from the Preservation Commission, and the hearing will be on the 6th of March. I noticed on the city agenda, it shows a Preservation Commission meeting on the 7th, but we don't meet on the 7th, we're meeting on the 6th. And it's just to have a hearing process on the Gates Hotel, and this is to start the process and hear information on it and to determine if it's locally protected. State and national does not give protection to a building. Anything on a state and national register can be tore down, but local designation allows the building to remain, and under our codes, section, ordinance chapter 27 is the historic preservation code that we have at the city, and that would allow it to remain, that it could not be demolished. Of course, that goes before city council again, and the city council can choose not to designate it locally. So I just wanted to let you know there's a petition out. We have an electronic one that's out. That's went over 100 people so far. We have a written one, which we just started approximately 24 hours ago. We have over 100 now, and we're letting that grow because that will be presented at the March 6th historic preservation hearing. So I just want to let you know the process. And of course, this is affecting the Gates Hotel, which in the general development plan, the GDP, that you've received. This shows in number 3 of the GDP approval with several conditions. The approval also includes a recommendation. It's a recommendation to remove the existing apartment building on Oak Street for expanded parking lot and access to Oak Street. Yes, it was an apartment building, but it has been mentioned as the Gates Hotel as far back as December of 2015. During the visioning meeting, it was mentioned as the Gates Hotel, and the visioning meeting, as you've seen on the projection on the screen, the only thing that wasn't mentioned was that the Gates Hotel took the most votes, and they wanted to restore and or reuse the Gates Hotel, and they want it to remain. And also the number 2 was there was a large concern that it not be a large amount of low-income housing. So anyway, I just wanted to bring out those points for information. Thank you.
Great. We have others who have asked to speak for informational purposes only. Fred Billman. We ask when you come up to the microphone if you would give your name and your address just for our record keeping.
You want my name and address?
Yes, when you get up to the microphone, please.
I probably actually don't need a microphone.
You've got a pretty good voice, Fred.
In a big lecture hall. My name is Fred Doman. I live on 1210 Camp Street, Platteville. As we all know, Platteville sits in sort of the center of a very historical neck of the woods. Just to the south, we have Galena, Illinois. To the southwest, we have Dubuque, which is very historical. And by the way, they're spending a fortune on restoring old buildings. And to the southwest, we have Potosi with nationally famous beer museum. East of here, a little ways, is the First Capitol. Platteville is a very, very historic place. So I would ask the city council to consider just 2 points. Number 1, I would advise you not to do anything with the Gates Hotel until the Preservation Commission makes its resolution. You could let the demolition of the building be contingent on the Preservation Commission if you wanted to. So that's one thing. If the old hotel is used as a residence, it's a very convenient place. Someone just told me a few days ago that, housing for young families is scarce in Platteville. I don't think housing in general in Platteville is very scarce. I see a number of places for rent, but for a young family, it seems very convenient to me. Grocery store is in walking distance. And the other thing is, you could even, suppose you were to give the building to a developer or sell it to him for $1 the way you did you bought a property for $1 million and sold it for $1. So you could do that and make a contract with the developer that he develops it up to certain specifications and so on and so forth. Plus the fact that the sooner that building is renovated, it would generate a little revenue. And God knows Platteville could use a little revenue these days. So that's my pitch.
Thank you. Next, for informational purposes, Adam Johnson.
Hi, my name's Adam Johnson, from 211 4th Street in Galena, Illinois. I'm a preservation architect and a friend of Gary's. I've worked with Gary before, and he asked me to come up and speak. I think we're along in this process, pretty far ways to be discussing this, but I think that when you have historic structures like this and you have the ability to redevelop them and rehab them, it's an important resource your community has of bringing in additional dollars to your community. I do projects where, especially in Dubuque, where we're getting up to 40 or 45% of the development costs back in tax credits from the state or local government. And that's money that comes into your community from the feds to the state, and here you've got a better tax credit. And if you can make use of these buildings, you bring a lot more money into your community through that process. So I would urge you to take a look at your historic buildings and consider them more as a resource and a way of helping develop that downtown area you have. Turning these kind of resources into parking lots is usually not a good way to take advantage of that kind of resource. So I urge you to rethink the demolition of the Great Gates Hotel. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, for informational purposes, Tobin Murdoch.
Good evening. My name is Tobin Murdoch. I'm from Galena, Illinois. And I would echo the sentiments of the last two speakers. I'm a developer from Galena, and I've worked on several projects with Adam Johnson, the architect, and Gary and I worked on a project together in Dubuque, a historical tax credit project. It's called 756 Main. It's called the Adobos building, but it was the former Walker Shoe building. It went beautifully. It's turned out fantastic. I'm very proud of it. It was a pleasure to work with Gary with the federal and state tax credits. And I would just ask you to reconsider the demolition of the property that you have, and maybe drive by 756 Main in Dubuque and take a look at what a nice piece of history restored can look like. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, for informational purposes, Jack Ludke.
My name is Jack Ludke. I'm the Executive Director for the Platteville Main Street Program, and I have nothing really deep to comment about, other than I was looking at the city new website, and on the website is all the information now about the draft copy for the developers agreement, also the site plan information, which I found very interesting and brings to a better understanding for all the general public of what is being proposed there. And I would compliment the city on that redevelopment of the site. It's very easy to navigate now, and I would encourage all of the citizens of Platteville, no matter what you're interested in, to visit the site, and you'll find that it has a lot of information on many different aspects of the city. Also, I want to make a comment about the developer that was chosen. I I've done some fact-checking on the developer and spoke to one of their clients on the east side of Wisconsin, who indicated that they are a great development company to work with, very easy to work with, and this was, I believe, a 2-year project at Shorewood, if I'm correct, and they had nothing but good things to say about the developer. And then Friday, I was visiting with another developer who has nothing to do with this project, who knows this company, and he spoke very highly of them as well. So I think the city is in good hands if they move forward with this project with this particular developer. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary, you are the only one who's asked to speak again, so I will give you the opportunity now.
Gary Prohaska, 280 Division Street, Platteville, Wisconsin. The only part that I am against on this is the inclusion of the Gates Hotel. It shows it as a recommendation for demolition, but I know down the line it specifies that the parking has to be placed there, and that is not a recommendation. So in other words, they're kind of contradictory there as to how it plays out. But anyway, that is the only thing I have against the project. And as far as parking being the issue, I just want to point out that the City Council has passed the Roundtree Commons development, which was 600 beds and had 34 parking places. They've had other developments which have had far less parking for the number of beds. To my understanding, this development, it has 71 units, but there's 149 beds. So in other words, there's some 2 bedrooms, there's some 3 bedrooms. But anyway, it's 149 beds. It is right across from probably the largest amount of parking that's there. I would think that something could be worked out with McGregor Plaza as far as parking. Also, we have the other parking lot that was shown just to the west of this development. And I'm thinking that this parking is more parking than any of the other ones have had percentage-wise. Even if we don't put parking behind the building, there is existing parking that possibly could be come into play on this. I don't have a problem with the footprint of the new construction. I think it would be a good addition. But my biggest concern is we're losing an incredibly historic structure. It has been deemed that by both the state and the national. I'm also concerned about not even considering this building in this process. In other words, the historic significance of this building really wasn't checked out. The Planning Commission didn't receive their information. City Council didn't receive it. I just have a concern that this process has moved forward even when the visioning statement directed it as being historic and things like that. So that's the only real concern I have. The parking issue could be mitigated by the parking that's around the area, and I'm sure there could be some kind of agreement worked out, and the Gates Hotel could remain. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have before us the plan unit development specific implementation plan. That is what we would be taking action on this evening. So I will open it up for council discussion. Anybody have anything they'd like to say about comments that they've been hearing so far? Or other comments you may have heard?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the plan unit development specific implementation plan for the former Pioneer Ford site.
I'll second the motion.
A motion and a second.
I'd like to make a comment though before we vote.
And before we discuss that, I would like to add as if the motion would be, the person making the motion would be agreeable with this. We had discussed, I will just bring this up, we had discussed with the developer different times about possibly adding some kind of directional operating pedestrian light
That's correct.
crossing from Oak Street to McGregor Plaza, something like the university's talking about with the blinking lights that would say pedestrian crossing. the developer is agreeable to looking at something like that, but that was not in Joe's notes, and so I just want to make sure that that's understood in the motion.
Yes.
And then the other thing was that we had also discussed with the developer fencing on the Oak Street, Pine Street parking lot, that would match the kind of fencing that we have on our current parking lots, like the one that's on Oak Street, and I guess it's on Main Street, corner of Main and Oak, and also on further up on Pine Street, we have the fencing.
Correct, but if you recall, the developer had just talked about doing the trellis
He's talking
idea
about doing
on
the trellis, I think
carport.
also maybe looking at the fencing to
Instead of
see
the
how the
fencing.
trellis would look, but, yeah,
Yeah.
so at least we would like to have that in the discussion that has been
Definitely
had
prefer the
before.
trellising
Yeah.
to fencing.
Either, well, both perhaps. I think the fencing should at least be looked at for continuity, because as you drive up Pine Street, you're gonna see the fencing on the parking lot that's next to the post office. So,
Okay.
the continuity. So the potential, at least, that if we require it, the developer would be agreeable with that. So that, again, that wasn't included in Joe's comments.
No.
So I don't know if you want to agree to that, Tom, or if it needs an amendment.
I agree with the trellis. Unless somebody wants to amend the motion to include that, but that's not part of my motion.
Okay.
Can we clarify what just happened? I'm sorry.
Okay, so the motion stands as it is.
So it does not include the fencing conversation,
That's correct. It's
and it does
just,
not include
Pedestrian.
the pedestrian crossing.
that's correct.
Okay. Unless someone wants to make an amendment. But in the meantime, Ken has his hand up, so I think he has something he'd like to say. Ken?
Yes, I would like to see the Gates property, Moore House, removed from the total property, because as Gary said, it's going to be going before the Historic Preservation Commission next Monday, and a decision will be made. So that I'd like to see that portion removed and delayed as far as voting on here tonight. And so in relation to that, I would like to amend the original motion to state that the Gates Hotel Moore property at this time be removed from the total package, and that it be reconsidered later after the Preservation Commission has come up with its findings.
So that is an amendment to the motion.
That's amendment to the main motion.
Is there a second to that amendment? Seeing none, we will not have an amendment to the motion.
Yes, my next question is whether the proposed developer would be willing to remove that property.
We have a
Himself.
We
motion.
have a
Yeah, we
motion
have a
that
motion,
needs to
Ken,
be
that we're
voted on.
discussing.
I'm asking the developer the question.
I think that it's a council decision as
So-
far as whether or not that building is removed.
Well, he can make a recommendation
make
or
a-
agree.
May I make a few comments?
Sure, go
So
ahead.
as I understand it, in talking with our city staff and in the presentation that was given earlier, the developer's going to be applying for the tax credits maybe as soon as this week, because they're due within the next couple weeks. I don't know exactly when. But as I understand it, the inclusion of the Gates Hotel and that land area is part of the application for the tax credit. So if we were to pull that out of the application at this time, it sounds like there's not much time, if any, for the developer to go back, go through the drawing board to that, redo their application and update it. And we'd probably be reducing the chances of tax credits at that point, which would then change the whole project. So my point being is that there's like a whole cause and effect at play here, that if we ask the developer to pull out the Gates Hotel at this moment, it's not as simple as it sounds.
Well, my question to the developer is that, are the tax credits including the Gates Hotel?
The simple answer is yes.
Because it's an entire package, Ken. That's what the
But
RFP was, that's what the developer.
But your comments to us were that you weren't going to make use of the property. It was too expensive.
Point of order.
Okay, Ken, we're discussing a motion. We're not discussing with the developer. We're discussing it as a council.
I'm discussing the total.
Point of order.
The total package.
I understand that you're discussing the total project. The total project is as the developer described. It includes removal of the Gates Hotel, and parking will be placed in that location.
So my comments about the project that I just want to bring up is, first, I want to thank everybody for their concern. The Gates Hotel is obviously beautiful, and I really think we have a beautiful community here in the downtown and a lot of historic buildings, and that was part of the reason I was excited to move to Platteville about 10 years ago. So my comments are this, though, is that we've gone down this process to this point, right? And it sounds bureaucratic that I'm saying it, but we've gone through so the parcel was for sale for 3.5 years before the city bought it. And then we spent a year talking with the developers and negotiating the situation. And so it is really, we've put the community has invested a lot into trying to have the best process we could for the situation. And I know that it's frustrating because the outcome's not going to be perfect for everybody. So, as my understanding is, if we were to change it at this point, we are risking the developer that we've been talking with for a very long time now. We're risking their financing from WIDA for the tax credits. We're risking our access to the $650,000 in grants to help with this project. So it's really hard for me, in best faith, to change the proposal at the 9th hour, knowing that we might be losing all these benefits for our community as an overall package. So I know that's really frustrating, and it's frustrating to me too. So I really want to tie this back to a final statement that two things: the developer may not get the WIDA tax credits. We'll hope that they do, but they may not, in which case we might be back to the drawing board. And if that is the scenario, let's look at the Gates Hotel again, because we have more time and we have more resources potentially at that point. But even if that doesn't happen and this project proceeds as is, I love all the enthusiasm for historic buildings, and I really wonder if there's a bigger conversation to be had in our community about maybe even starting some other nonprofit that can actually help go out and finance these projects so that it's not all on the city or all on private builders, because it's a frustrating situation. These are really expensive projects. And I realize private businesses can't often take an old building and restore it very easily. It's super expensive, which is also why the city's not doing it, because we don't have a lot of money for these projects right now. So I wanted to be sure to say that line of logic to everybody, because this is difficult for me, because I also think the historic buildings are very beautiful and important for our community.
Yeah.
I'd like to respond to part of that, and what I want to say is that we have not actually been working very long on the Gates Hotel. Back in April 2016, in the RFP, or the proposal from the developer, they talked about development of the property of the Gates Hotel, I believe for residential. And then in December of last year, then we found out that they did not want to do that. So it's only been since December that we've really been talking about trying to save the hotel from demolition. Now, as far as the Historic Preservation Commission is concerned, we do not go out and start studying on things that, are buildings that are not threatened. This is the building that is being threatened, so we started studying on it. Gary Prohaska spent tremendous amount of time studying on this particular project, and so this has only been since December that we've really been working a lot on it as far as trying to save the Gates Hotel. So I disagree as far as we've been spending years on this particular project, and that is not the case.
And just a clarification is that I didn't say we've been spending years talking about the Gates Hotel. I did say that we've been spending a long time on the project as a whole.
It's been only since 2016. 2015, that's only about 2 years. That's not very long.
Other comments?
The world going down, the gates stay standing.
I'm sorry, this is for council discussion time. I would say that, echoing a little bit of what Amy said, and looking back at some of the timeline, and I think our city manager gave us a timeline, so everybody should be aware of that. As far as McGregor Plaza parking goes, the developer had talked to McGregor Plaza, and they are not interested at this time in leasing any parking. So he did explore that option. The local designation, if that were to be done with this building, a local designation would require the Historic Preservation Commission to review and approve any changes to the exterior of the building or the property, including building demolition. So that takes it out of the responsibility of the council. It then becomes the responsibility of the Historic Preservation Commission. I'm not sure that many people would understand that in the community, and I do think that the council should be, as elected officials, the one to make the ultimate decision. The other thing is that while Gary keeps saying it's historic, basically it's a building that has history. It has not been designated historic. We have a letter saying potentially it could be historic, but if you look at the information, and again, it was in our packet, so again, if the public wants to get the packet and take a look at this, but the process of then submitting to the state and the federal level could take up to a year and a half before you could get designation for state and national, and it's not guaranteed that you will get state and national designation. If you do not, and if we were to do a local designation, if you do not get the state and national, you don't get the historic tax credits. If that were to happen, you'd go back to the local historic designation and say to the developer, I hope you have a lot of your own money because you're not going to get the state and federal taxes. It's, to me, I'm going to echo what Amy has said. We've been in this process since December of 2015. And I know that at one point, and Gary shared this at the Historic Preservation Commission meeting, in June, he sent a email up to the State Historic Society, I think it was the state one, in Wisconsin, yeah, Historical Society, asking why wasn't the building included when the commercial district was, the Main Street Commercial District was established. And his response is he doesn't know why it wasn't included. Two reasons maybe would be that usually when you do a district boundary, you don't go across the block and pick out one more building to add to that whole commercial district. And he also said that perhaps the majority of the block on which that hotel is located lacked the integrity to be included. And Gary himself has said that sometimes you do not get a building designated simply because there's nothing on the block that fits in with that building. And we've got Hearthside on one side, we're gonna have a very nice new building on the other side, and the hotel's gonna be sitting there. And I guess I'm, again, echoing some of the other comments. We have a developer that I think is going to do a very nice project, and I think the time has gone by to say that we can now back up and say that this building needs to be taken out.
Well, as
There is
far,
one
far
other
as far
comment.
as your comments here,
Yep.
the problem with Main Street as I see it, the downtown, is that the historic district, the commercial historic district is so zigzag back and forth. At the time they set this up, they should have set it up more in straighter lines than to go out to a building and skip over buildings. And this has led through the years to problems as far as working with historic preservation. So there should have been straighter lines drawn as far as what's the historic district, and it would be in that district, non-contributing buildings and contributing buildings. So this, just because the Gates Hotel is not in the historic district, this is the way the thing was drawn up, and it shouldn't have been drawn like that. That's the opinion that I have, and that's what I see.
You may be right on that, Ken. I know when the residential survey was done, there were also houses excluded.
There's
Tom?
one other point I want to add, and many people don't realize this, that in 1995, when a study was done, the State Historical Society took in consideration that building. And in 1987, that building was up for demolition. It was not demolished, but in 1987, it was up for demolition. It didn't get destroyed because Hearthside was looking at destroying it and adding it to their property. They did not do that. Now, at that same time, the Bolts, my understanding, purchased the property, or shortly afterwards, and turned it into a rental unit. So we can say it shouldn't have been destroyed, or we shouldn't destroy it now, but it was up for demolition at that time. So we have to take If it was up for demolition in 1987, and the only reason it was saved because somebody purchased it to have it as a student rental, there was nothing in 1995 that they recorded to keep it or put it on the registry to have it as a historical building within the city of Platteville. The historical commission did not want to put it in there. So, I mean, there's a point that we can keep talking about the same thing, the same thing, and the same thing. But there's a point where we have to say a building is a building and it can only last a certain amount of time. And it's come to that point where sometimes you can't keep a building to stop the progress of the community. You can keep the history of that building in so many different ways. And this is what we need to do. We need to keep the history of the building, but it's not just keeping the building. That's not going to solve anything by saving the building, because saving a building, what happens in 10, 15 years? Is the building going to be in the same shape? Is the person that's going to buy the building keep it in the same shape? It deteriorates, and that building is deteriorated beyond belief. Whether it looks sound on the outside, on the inside, it is in really bad shape. The developer took a look at it. If the developer thought that it could be saved for any reason to make the development work, would they not develop it? Would they not try to save it? They didn't. If they would have saved that building, would the historical commission wanted to make it a historical building? Would they went in front of the developer and says, we want you now to save it as a historical building? They only came to us when it was going to be destroyed. They didn't go to the developer while it was going to be saved, as the developer wanted to save it for residential. They could have had and went to the developer and said, we want you to save it. Yes. Will you work with us to save it as a historical building? They didn't do that. So to come in at the 9th hour of a 10-hour program and say, we want you to save it, is doing a disservice not only to the council, to the developer, but it's doing a disservice to the citizens of Platteville. Because you can't keep doing this at the last minute. It's not right to the developer. They spend money and time and effort, and it's not right for them. Whether you know it or not, they put time and effort into this. Now, they're developing the development, and they're out there to make money. There's no doubt about that. You can't blame them. That's why they develop properties. But they're also doing it for the community of Platteville because we asked them to do it. So let's give them the opportunity to do it. Let's give them the opportunity to help us save a history of a building that we can cherish, that we can cherish the history of that building. It's important to us. The building itself will eventually die and fall down no matter how much we try to save it. But not the history of the building. That can continue from now until ever, as long as we keep the history going. That is what is important. So all I'm asking you to do as a city council is to look at that and remember that this does not destroy the building. It only helps us revise history. Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Otherwise, we have a motion on the floor.
Yes, I have a comment. I guess my comment is progress making a parking lot? Is that what we call progress? And the other thing is, as far as last minute, this is not last minute. I did point out that we don't look at saving buildings until they are faced with demolition. And we didn't learn that until December.
All right. Seeing no other comments, we'll vote.
Francis?
Yes.
Nall?
Yes.
Killian?
No,
Nichols?
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson?
Yes.
Westoby?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, everyone. Next item then is the development agreement. Staff report on this, or?
That was covered in the earlier presentation, so.
Nothing has changed from the last meeting?
The PowerPoint that I did earlier covered the developers agreement.
Okay, and does anyone have, any council member have a question on the developers agreement? All right, seeing none, we would need a motion to approve the developer agreement for the former Pioneer Ford site.
Also move that we approve the development agreement for the former Pioneer Ford site with capital investment.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Again, any discussion?
yes, I have a question. For the committee that selected this particular developer, this particular project, could you summarize, and I'm going to ask this of the city manager, could you summarize as to why a project was selected that would put in 60 low-income rental units and 11 market-grade rental units? What was the rationale for this project? Could you summarize that for us, please? There were seven people on that committee. I thought that you could summarize the reasoning.
I'll do my best, but I wasn't necessarily a voting member of that committee. So there was an RFP, as you are aware, that was issued with respect to the property. And that RFP was reviewed with the council with respect to the content of the RFP. The RFP was out for, I think, around 4 months. Joe reached out to a number of potential developers. In the end, we received 4 responses to the RFP. 2 of them were sort of deemed as not being suitable in terms of meeting the terms, the complete terms of the RFP. There were 2 developers that were possibilities, of which General Capital was one. The task force interviewed both of those developers and then made the recommendation to move forward with General Capital as being the proposal that best matched the content of the RFP that had been approved by the council. And then we also had a work session, of course, with the council where you had an opportunity to review General Capital's proposal, and you also directed us to proceed.
That answer your question?
Is there a need for low-income affordable housing? And I guess the next question is, who's going to be attracted to these apartments?
I think that might be a question
Maybe
better
the
directed to some
Developer
Developers
could
make them-
answer that question.
Okay.
I assume you did a survey. Somebody brought that up to me today. Was a survey done?
Yeah.
And they were comparing to the villas. Supposedly the villas, they have low income and they don't have a full rate yet. I don't know all the particulars. Go ahead.
Right, sure. So this process started with us looking at communities that we wanted to work in, and the RFP was one kind of entree to Platteville to actually look at a specific site here. We had been here before looking at student housing incidentally, just as an aside. So I was familiar with Platteville. Years ago, I made a trip here. And then also in the last several years, we were starting to look just at opportunities. We're a Wisconsin-based company. We decided that if we grow, we don't want to start flying all over the place away from our families. We're going to look at Wisconsin. This is I drive home here and back tonight. So this is a local project essentially for us by our definition. So we're identifying communities early on that fit some parameters, including having sites that are in and around downtowns. We like doing mixed-use development. We like doing development where that's pedestrian oriented. We find that that's better for the market. It makes the building more attractive than in the middle of a cornfield. So typically we don't do a lot of suburban style development. We actually seek out more urban infill locations. So you start to, as that starts to align, one of the things that we have been seeking out are locations for, I very specifically call them affordable housing developments. I differentiate affordable housing from low-income housing, which I know that the tax credit is called the low-income housing tax credit, but you have to look at the spectrum of incomes that those programs serve. On the very low end of the spectrum, there's a program that is more assisting residents who pay a certain percentage of their income to live in a unit, and the government actually provides assistance for them to make their rent. This program is kind of swinging to the other end of the pendulum of affordability, where everyone has to pay their own rent. There may be some residents that may have that may qualify for certain programs because they have certain disabilities or veterans or things like that. We would certainly welcome those. In fact, that's awesome. But then our target market is really that middle, that middle income in the affordability spectrum. That's the majority of the units. And a study was done in Wisconsin that's actually kind of shocking. The United Way sponsored. I don't have it with me tonight, but you can look it up. It's called the ALICE study, ALICE, and it's asset limited, income constrained, and employed. That's what that ALICE study is. They're doing them all over the U.S. Wisconsin just had theirs done this past year. The ALICE study actually identified kind of a remarkably low income for a lot of people who are working decent jobs, trying to make ends meet, but they have limited assets. They're income constrained by the employment that they have, but they are employed. So that is my market. They may be people who are working certain types of jobs in Platteville that don't pay a lot. They may be the nonprofits. They may be folks from the university. They may be all kinds of different people. But that's the market that we target. That's my desired population. That's why I do what I do, because I get excited about providing cool, hip, trendy housing that's also very affordable. I mean, that's kind of why we're doing what we're doing. So in a very long-winded way, I wanted to respond to that, because when I hear low-income housing referred to kind of in a derogatory way, with all due respect, I know you didn't mean that way, but when I hear that, I bristle a little bit, because communities always say, this is a low-income housing project. By definition, I want to be clear about what exactly it is and who the target audience is, because it's kind of the underserved, I'll call them the ALICE population, that are decent people that don't make a lot of money but need a decent place to live. And that's kind of, that's what it is.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I would maybe just add on one more point, and my recollection is that actually affordable housing was a council goal that was established in 2015. I can't say that with 100% certainty, because you established those goals with previous city manager Larry Berkey. But if my memory serves me right, that actually was one of the 6 goals that had been set by the council, at least for that year.
Yes, we talked about affordable housing, but also we talked about single-family affordable housing too, and that's probably the next question I have here, is how we're going to meet the need as far as helping people buy a home in the city of Platteville. We do not have a good market in Platteville as far as properties that single families can buy. They can't afford them because the rental market, as far as students, has priced them out of the market in general. We've talked about that time and time again. So we're not facing that. We don't seem to have any money now left. We have money, we're giving away money, putting in money, whatever you want to use per term, for this, for lower income, whatever word I should be using here, words, but we don't have a program for single family. We need to get people in here that have families so that the school districts can get more students, so that more people live in Platteville rather than living in towns around here, different places away from Platteville.
So I'm just gonna do a follow-up reply because Ken, we've had this conversation for many years now that part of the intent behind this project is it helps people move out of existing single-family homes that are being used as rental units.
I thought
And then
about
it
that.
allows the single-family homes to be returned back to single families and be fixed up in other ways. That's the intent, right? That's using basically a relatively free market model to achieve our housing goals. So this project does address our need for single-family housing in Platteville. Not in an immediate direct way, but the long-term impacts, I think we're all hoping, is that it will clean up single-family housing and allow us to have better single-family housing. So I just want to make it clear to the audience that this is part of a broader conversation that we have had.
I understand that, I thought about that, and the question is, if we do get these houses available, how are we gonna help the people? Because it's gonna take money to repair them, to fix them up.
You are correct, and that problem has not been solved. There are no tax credits out there that I'm aware of, Ken, for that
Nothing,
particular
no
type
tax
of
credits to help 'em, so-
rehabilitation.
It's also hard to
So-
use TIF dollars and TID dollars for that type of project. So just the funding that we're using on this project isn't necessarily the funding we could use for what you're proposing.
Correct. All right, we have a development agreement. I believe we have a motion in a second.
Yes.
We'll vote.
Francis?
Yes.
Nall?
Yes.
Killian?
No,
Nichols?
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson?
Yes.
Westoby?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, next action item, ordinance 1708, creating section 41, whatever, misuse of 9/11 emergency services. Our chief of police is going to explain this to us.
Good evening. Adoption of this ordinance would give our officers a specific ordinance to use to cite offenders who make fictitious or unwanted 911 calls to either Grant County or the Platteville Police Department.
So Grant County and the police?
Right.
And the Platteville Police Department, okay. And then the schedule of cash deposits is part of that?
Right. And that $100 first offense within a year, $150 and $200 plus court costs and whatnot on each offense.
Okay, anybody have any questions on that? Otherwise, is there a motion to approve the ordinance 1708?
I move to approve ordinance number 17-08.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Kind of a tie, whichever one you want to take, Jen. All right,
I
we'll
heard
vote.
Westoby first. Francis?
Yes.
Nall?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes,
Nichols?
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson?
Yes.
Westoby?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next is ordinance 1709 regarding schedule of cash deposits, stormwater management.
Yes, we had discussed this last time, that this would be coming. This is the follow-up for our three stormwater ordinances, chapter 46, 47, and 48, proposing forfeitures. Chapter 46 and 47 have the same recommended forfeitures, 100, 300, 500 for first, second, and third or more offenses within a year. Chapter 48, illicit discharge, we're recommending 100, 500, $1,000 for first, second, and third. And I also have the clarification that the actual ordinances that were passed. This is language that is in those ordinances that correspond with the cash deposits.
Comments or questions? Is there a motion?
Yes. I'll move to approve ordinance 1709.
I'll second.
A motion and a second to approve the ordinance. We'll vote.
Francis?
Yes.
Nall?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson?
Yes.
Westoby?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Resolution 1703, a conditional use permit. Joe?
This is the annual request submitted from Iverson Construction for the asphalt plant in the rock quarry, which is located just north of East Mineral Street. There are no changes proposed from previous years. We haven't had any issues that have come up recently, so staff does recommend approval with the usual conditions we have on the approval, that the permit shall expire at the end of the asphalt producing season. The permit shall apply only to the subject property, and that the applicant provides dust control if needed along the entrance driveway to the property. The Plan Commission also recommended approval with the same conditions. Any questions?
Seeing none, is there a motion?
I move to approve the CU.
A second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to approve resolution 1703. We'll vote.
Francis?
Yes.
Nall?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson?
Yes.
Westoby?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And finally, resolution 1704, amending a fee schedule.
Yes, this is also a follow-up for the stormwater ordinances. We did the enforcement portion of it, and this is to amend the fee schedule for Chapter 46 for erosion control, and Chapter 47 for post-construction stormwater management as listed here.
Questions, anyone? All right, is there a motion?
Make a
Also
motion.
move that we approve Resolution 1704, amending the fee schedule for stormwater management and erosion control permit fees.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. We'll vote.
Francis?
Yes.
Nall?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes.
Nichols?
Yes.
Seaboth Wilson?
Yes.
Westoby?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, information and discussion, resolution closing a loophole. Known as the dark store.
As you are aware, one of the key initiatives of the League of Wisconsin Municipalities over the last couple of years has been to close a tax loophole known as the dark store issue. And basically large box retailers such as Walgreens, CVS, Target, Menards, basically use the existing law to have successfully argued and been upheld by the courts that their property should be valued as if it were vacant. And as they are making challenges to their assessments, it has a big impact, and it could have a big impact on Platteville because we do have a number of big box retailers here. When the tax assessment for these big box entities is lowered, that then shifts the tax burden onto residential properties and potentially other smaller businesses within the community. So the League of Wisconsin Municipalities has asked the communities to consider passing a resolution in support of closing this tax loophole related to these big box retail stores. And that's what's attached.
Is Kmart going to be a dark store?
Well, yeah, Kmart will be a vacant building here shortly.
Dark store for other businesses in town to compare to?
With respect to,
It could be.
I mean, Kmart will actually be a vacant building because the business is
I'm getting
vacated.
at, it'll be a vacant building, no
Yes.
business. So will that be a dark store for some of them?
That isn't this particular issue, but yes, it will be a vacant building, and its tax assessment could be lowered as a result of that.
So just to clarify, actually, stores that are being used that are not vacant are arguing that they are vacant.
They are arguing that they should be valued for the purposes of tax assessment as if they were vacant.
Which is totally messed up. So I really appreciate you bringing this to our attention.
Well, the League of Wisconsin Municipalities has really spearheaded this effort on behalf of all of the municipalities in the state of Wisconsin. So I'm going to pass the credit along to them.
I want to say something about this is the League of Wisconsin Municipalities has been putting out a number of emails to council members, and I sent out a Facebook message about this about a month ago, and I was really surprised the response that I got from all over the nation, that people don't understand this. And they're surprised. What do you mean? And they really didn't realize that many residential communities or communities that have large stores, especially Walgreens and others, are using this to basically put the tax burden onto the residential properties. So they get paid less in their property tax shares. So I want to recommend to any of our residents that are taxpayers to contact your state legislators and demand that they work for legislation to take this away from the big box stores, because they are hurting you, the taxpayers. They are claiming they are reducing your taxes. No, they are not. And I'll be very emphatic about that. Tell your state legislatures to make sure they are going out there and taking that away from these high box store people, because you are paying the price. They say they are taking your real estate taxes and making them lower. They are not. They're going to go up. I'm being political, but it's about time somebody does. So please take that, and please call your legislature and tell them, write them a letter, call them, and be consistent about it, because they won't listen to you until you do. Thank you.
And I would note that in the information, again, that we have, and if you want more information about this, you can go to the League of Wisconsin Municipalities website and read about it there. They have great information. But Indiana has overwhelmingly passed legislation to turn this effort back. And so the legislation that's being proposed in Wisconsin is based somewhat on that particular state. And Michigan is also working on passing a dark store fix bill, as they call it. So in Oshkosh, Walgreens did challenge the city of Oshkosh's assessments, and they had their taxes reduced by $305,672. And that's what the property owners, other property owners in the community had to make up. And that was 1 year. And I think most of you know about the Land's End, which is a little different, but reassessment doesn't mean that the taxes aren't going to be paid by somebody, and it is put upon the mostly residential. So it's important that we take a stand to get that fixed.
To whom is this going to be sent?
This will be sent to the League of Wisconsin Municipalities and also probably to our legislators. Yep, correct. To our Senator Mark Line, Representative Travis Tranel. They will
And
definitely receive copies as well.
will there be like a little personal letter asking them to respond to what we're sending in?
I think we could include a letter asking for their response, just
Yes,
to
I think
acknowledge that they
would be
received it.
nice.
We certainly can, and I believe that the individuals that represented Platteville on League Lobby Day also discussed this issue with Senator Mark Line and Representative Childs.
That's true. Barb
Or their
Dawes and I
staff.
went up to the League Lobby Day, and this was one of the issues that we discussed specifically with our legislators.
I would like to get back more than a form letter, than a form answer.
You might get back an email, Ken, but we could try for that. That's usually how you get a response, but.
Yeah.
All right. That's it. We will finish this part of the meeting and go to a work session. So we'll be going off camera for that, and we will take about a 5-minute break.